My mother and sister were laughing on my sofa when they told me I was homeless, so I called my lawyer and set a trap they never saw coming. They thought they had stolen my condo, but I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and showed them the one fatal detail they had overlooked. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The flight from the remote drilling site in Western Australia was a 34-hour nightmare of recycled air and screaming children. For the last 6 months, I had been living out of a reinforced shipping container, managing a geological survey team on a project that was equal parts stressful and isolating. I was exhausted down to my bones. My back ached, my hair was matted with grime and dry shampoo, and all I had thought about for the last 3 days was a hot shower in my own bathroom and collapsing into my own bed. My condo was my sanctuary. I'd bought it, all cash, with the bonus from my first major project. It was the one place on Earth that was entirely mine. I keyed in the code to my building's garage, the familiar beep a welcome sound. I parked my car, or rather the long-term parking service had, keeping it ready for my return, and grabbed my heavy duffel bag. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt agonizingly slow. I finally reached my door, 12B, and fumbled with the keys, my hands trembling slightly from fatigue. The key slid in but wouldn't turn. I frowned, jiggling it. Nothing. Annoyance pricked at my exhaustion. Had the tumbler seized up from disuse? I tried again, pushing hard. It still wouldn't budge. I was just about to call the building manager when I heard a sound from inside. Laughter. A cold dread, heavier than my exhaustion, settled in my stomach. I was meticulous about my arrangements. No one should be in my home. I pressed my ear to the solid wood, and the laughter came again, clearer this time. It was a high-pitched, familiar cackle that I'd known all my life. Chloe, my sister. And then a second voice, deeper, joining in. My mother, Margaret. I knocked hard. Chloe, Mom, what are you doing in there? The lock is stuck. The laughter stopped abruptly. I heard scuffling, then the click of the deadbolt sliding back. The door opened, not wide, but just enough for my sister's smirking face to appear in the gap. She was wearing one of my silk robes. "Oh, hi, Jane," she said, her voice dripping with a casual, cruel amusement. "You're back early." "What are you doing here, Chloe? And why is the lock changed?" I pushed the door, forcing her to stumble back. I stepped into my own foyer and my bag dropped from my hand with a heavy thud. It wasn't my foyer anymore. The neutral, calm beige I'd painted the walls was gone, replaced by a garish, trendy millennial pink. My minimalist console table was gone, replaced by a cheap, white-tanned gold imitation. And the smell? Instead of my clean, subtle scent of sandalwood, the air was thick with a cloying, fruity perfume. My mother, Margaret, was sitting on my sofa in the living room, her feet propped up on my coffee table, holding one of my wine glasses. "Well, look who it is," Mom said, not bothering to get up. She took a sip of wine. "We were wondering when you'd show up." "What is going on?" I demanded, my voice rising. "What have you done to my home? Chloe, what is all your stuff doing here?" Chloe drifted past me, tightening the belt on my robe. She flopped onto the armchair opposite Mom. "Well, sis, things have been so crazy. You know Mark and I are splitting up. It's just been a total nightmare. I had nowhere to go." "A divorce," I said, dumbfounded. Chloe, I'm sorry, but that doesn't explain why you're here." "Don't be such a drama queen, Jane," Mom snapped, waving her glass. "Your sister needed help, real-world help, not just, flying off to play in the dirt and ignore your family." I flinched. "Playing in the dirt? Mom, I'm a geological engineer. That dirt just paid for the surgery you needed on your knee last year." "See, always throwing money in our faces," Chloe said, rolling her eyes. "Anyway, I needed a stable place to live for the divorce proceedings. My lawyer said I needed to establish residency, and Mom, being the wonderful mother she is, helped me out." A sick, cold feeling was creeping up my spine. "Helped you? How? By breaking into my home. Don't be silly, Mom said, finally sitting up. She placed the wine glass on the table, her expression hardening. I helped her with the power of attorney you left me. The medical power of attorney? I shot back. The one that's only valid if I'm incapacitated. The one that has absolutely nothing to do with my finances or my property. Chloe and my mother exchanged a look. It was a look of shared, smug conspiracy. And Chloe giggled. Oh, Janie, she said, her voice like poison syrup. You're always so meticulous, so technical. Mom knew you'd want to help me, so she just signed the condo over to me. To help with my divorce, you know, to show the court I had assets. The air left my lungs. What? She signed it over, Mom said, her voice flat. It's Chloe S. now. We filed the paperwork last month. It's all legal and done. You can't just abandon your family and expect everything to wait for you. I stared at them. The exhaustion, the jet lag, the dirt on my skin, it all vanished, replaced by a white-hot, silent rage. They were sitting there on my furniture under my roof, drinking my wine, and telling me they had stolen my home. And then they laughed, both of them. A full, hearty laugh at the look of pure, unadulterated shock on my face. Hope you don't mind being homeless, Chloe cackled, raising her glass in a toast to my mother. You can probably find a hotel, right? You make so much money after all. My entire world tilted. The two people who were supposed to be my family, my blood, had just dispossessed me with a smile. The betrayal was worse than any physical pain I could imagine. For a long, silent minute, I just stood in my desecrated foyer. My mind was racing, trying to process the sheer audacity, the criminality of what they were claiming. Homeless. They had used that word, laughed about it, my own mother and sister. The initial wave of shock receded, and something else, something cold and hard, began to take its place. It was the same feeling I got on site when a critical piece of drilling equipment failed, and I had 3 hours to find a solution before the entire project collapsed. It was focus. They were still smiling, waiting for the explosion. They were waiting for me to scream, to cry, to beg. That's what Chloe, in particular, lived for, my emotional reactions. So I gave them nothing. I slowly bent down, picked up my heavy duffel bag, and slung it back over my shoulder. I looked around the room, at the tacky pink walls and the cheap, fake fur pillows tossed on my expensive sofa. You painted it pink, I said, my voice eerily calm. Chloe's smile faltered. This wasn't the reaction she'd planned for. What? Yes, it needed some life. Your beige was depressing. I see. I nodded slowly, my gaze sweeping over them. And the locks, you changed them. Well, duh, Chloe said, regaining her footing. It's my condo now. I couldn't have you just walking in whenever you wanted. Of course, I said. That makes sense. I turned, walked back to the door, and opened it. I paused on the threshold and looked back at them. My mother, Margaret, was frowning now, her brow furrowed in confusion. This placid, cold response was unnerving her. Jane, don't be dramatic, Mom said, her tone shifting toward her familiar, guilt-tripping whine. We can talk about this. Maybe you can stay for a few nights until you find a place. No, that's quite all right, I said, my voice polite. You're right, it's your place now, you should be comfortable. And I walked out, pulling the door closed behind me with a quiet click. I didn't go to the elevator. I walked to the concrete stairwell, went down one flight to the 11th floor, and sat on the cold steps. The adrenaline that had flooded my system began to ebb, and the exhaustion, mixed with a profound, aching sadness, washed over me. My hand was trembling. I pulled out my phone, my fingers feeling thick and clumsy. My first call wasn't to a hotel. It wasn't to the police. It was to my best friend, Grace. She picked up on the second ring. Jane, you're back. How was the flight? Are you home? I'll come over with wine. A single dry sob escaped me. Grace, I whispered. The cheerful energy in her voice vanished. Jane, what's wrong? Where are you? I'm in the stairwell of my building, I said, the words sounding absurd. Grace, they're in my home, Mom and Chloe, they They said they signed it over to Chloe. They changed the locks. They called me homeless and they laughed. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end, followed by a string of words that, as a therapist, Grace probably wasn't supposed to say. They what? Margaret and Chloe? Jane, that's not possible. That's insane. They said Mom used the power of attorney. I explained, my voice hollow. The medical one, that's not how that works. Grace was furious. Okay, stay right there. No, wait, you can't. Go to my place, you have the key. Go there now, I'm leaving work. And then you're calling Meredith. Not tomorrow, tonight. Meredith Vance, my lawyer. The thought of her sharp, no-nonsense mind was like a life raft. You're right, I said, a flicker of steel returning. I'm heading to your place, and I'm calling Meredith. Good, and Jane, Grace said, her voice firm. They are bad people. What they did is not just cruel, it's a crime, don't you dare feel guilty or sad for 1 second longer. It's time to be angry. I hung up and stood. The sadness was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but Grace was right. The anger was coiling, hot and clean. I walked down the remaining 11 flights of stairs and out into the cool night air, my phone already dialing Meredith's number. As I walked, an internal thought, a phrase I'd repeated to myself for years whenever dealing with my family, surfaced again. They always forget one crucial thing. They always had. They forgot my deadlines, my birthdays, my allergies. They forgot the sacrifices I'd made, the checks I'd written. They saw me as an abstract, orbiting bank account, not a person. And in their arrogant, greedy haste, I knew they had forgotten something this time, too. They had forgotten who I really was. They had forgotten that I am, by nature and by profession, a person who always reads the fine print. Grace's apartment was a sanctuary of soft lighting, calming blue walls, and the scent of green tea. She had arrived just moments after I did, enveloping me in a hug that I hadn't realized I desperately needed. While I took the hottest, longest shower of my life, she handled everything, ordering an absurd amount of Thai food and fielding the call from Meredith. When I emerged, wrapped in one of her fluffy robes, a plate of pad see ew and a glass of wine were waiting for me on the coffee table. Grace was on her laptop, her therapist face replaced by a look of grim determination. Okay, she said, pushing her glasses up. Meredith is, well, she's Meredith, she sounded almost happy. I think she lives for this kind of thing, she's already pulling public records. She wants to meet at her office, 9 a.m. sharp. And she said, and I quote, do not, under any circumstances, contact them, text them, or answer their calls. Which, by the way, your phone has been buzzing nonstop for 20 minutes. I glanced at my phone. 12 missed calls from my mother. The script was predictable. The smugness had worn off, and my cold, quiet exit had triggered her panic. The "Oh, Jane, I'm so worried, please call me" phase would be next, followed by the "How dare you ignore your mother after what I've done for you" phase. I switched it to silent and turned it face down. Thank you, Grace, I mean it. My brain wasn't working. That's what they count on, she said, sitting cross-legged on the rug. They hit you with this tactical strike of cruelty, and they expect you to shatter. They expect you to be so busy grieving the betrayal that you can't fight back, especially Chloe. I nodded, forking noodles I couldn't taste. She's always been like this. Do you remember in high school when I saved up all summer for that used car? The down payment I'd earned bagging groceries. I remember, Grace said, her voice tight. Mom borrowed it from my bank account, just took it, because Chloe had racked up a credit card bill on a shopping spree and was too distressed to get a job. When I confronted them, Mom told me I was being selfish. She said, "It's just money, Jane. Your sister's happiness is at stake." And Chloe just stood behind her, smirking, wearing one of the new outfits. It was the story of our lives. I was the responsible one, the workhorse. I got good grades, earned scholarships, and clawed my way into a demanding, male-dominated field. I sacrificed my social life, relationships, and my own comfort, working in brutal conditions to build a life for myself. Chloe was the delicate one. She was pretty, charming, and profoundly lazy. She de-coasted through life on a wave of charm, small handouts, and my mother's fierce, blind protection. Her profession, if you could call it that, was a lifestyle blogger, which seemed to involve her taking endless photos of brunches she didn't pay for and outfits she returned after wearing. And my mother, Margaret, she was the enabler-in-chief. She resented my success because it was independent of her. My achievements were a quiet judgment on her own life, and she compensated by pouring all her energy into saving Chloe, which usually meant guilt-tripping me. My condo, I realized, was the ultimate symbol of my independence, and they couldn't stand it. The so-called divorce from Mark was just the latest drama. I'd met Mark a few times. He seemed as vacuous as Chloe was, obsessed with appearances and brand names. Their lifestyle was a house of cards funded by small loans from my mother and, indirectly, from me. I picked up my phone again and opened the text thread with Chloe from 2 months ago. I'd been at the survey site, but I had satellite internet. Me heard things are tough with Mark. I'm sorry, Chloe. Let me know if you need to talk. Chloe, it's fine. Mark is just being a baby about money. You know how it is. Me? Well, I'm on contract, but I could probably spot you a little for a good divorce lawyer if you really need one. Chloe, THX maybe. Ohm is handling it. Don't worry about it. Mom is handling it, I read aloud to Grace. She was, Grace said, her eyes dark. She was handling the forgery. They've been planning this for months, Jane. This wasn't a snap decision. This was a conspiracy. The food turned to ash in my mouth. My own mother, my own sister. They hadn't just seen an opportunity, they had created it. They had waited until I was literally on the other side of the planet, isolated and unreachable, to execute a plan to steal the most valuable thing I owned. That power of attorney, I said, my mind clicking. I signed it at Mom's kitchen table 5 years ago, right before my first big overseas project, the one in the Andes. She pushed it on me. Just in case, honey, what if you get hurt? Who will make decisions for you? I thought she was being caring. She was being strategic, Grace countered. Or maybe Chloe gave her the idea. Either way, they've had that document in a drawer, just waiting. I finished the wine in one long swallow. The exhaustion was back, but it was now laced with a cold, clear-eyed fury. Meredith will know what to do. Yes, she will, Grace said. And so will you. You're the smartest person I know, Jane. They think you're just a bank. They forgot you're a brilliant engineer who builds things and solves impossible problems. They've badly miscalculated. I looked at my phone. The screen was dark, but I knew it was filled with panicked, manipulative messages from my mother. They have, I said. They've forgotten one very crucial thing. And tomorrow, at 9 a.m., I'm going to find out exactly how much it's going to cost them. The offices of Vance, Holloway and Partners were on the 30th floor of a steel and glass tower downtown. It was the kind of place where the air hummed with quiet, expensive power. Meredith Vance, my lawyer and a senior partner, was exactly the same. She was immaculate in a charcoal gray suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She didn't bother with pleasantries. Coffee, she asked, gesturing to a sleek machine. Please, I said, taking a seat at the massive glass conference table. Right. She handed me a cup of espresso and sat opposite me, opening a crisp file folder. I've been up since you called Grace. I've already pulled the preliminary title report, the transfer deed they filed, and the original power of attorney you filed with your bank, which I assume is a copy of the one your mother has. That's fast, I said, impressed. This isn't fast, Jane. This is furious, Meredith said, a rare, thin smile playing on her lips. What your mother and sister have done is so spectacularly stupid it's almost beautiful. They've committed, by my initial count, at least 3 major felonies: forgery, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud. It's a trifecta of idiocy. She slid a document across the table. It was a copy of the quitclaim deed filed with the county registrar 6 weeks prior. Signed, it read, Jane Harris, by her agent Margaret Harris. This is the forgery, Meredith explained. The power of attorney you signed is a durable power of attorney for healthcare. It explicitly states it can only be activated by 2 attending physicians declaring you incapacitated. It has zero, and I mean zero, authority over your real or financial assets. Signing this deed was the legal equivalent of her scribbling on a napkin with a crayon. It's utterly, completely fraudulent. A wave of relief washed over me, so strong I felt dizzy. So, it's not real, the transfer is void. It's voidable, it's a fraudulent cloud on your title, and we will have it expunged. That's the easy part, Meredith said, leaning forward. The hard part is deciding what comes next. A civil suit is a given. We will sue them for damages, for the cost of changing the locks back, for the repainting, for my fees, and for emotional distress. But the question, Jane, is the criminal part. I swallowed. You mean, jail? Potentially, yes. Meredith's gaze was unflinching. This brings us to the second, more interesting part of my early morning research. She slid another paper across. This is Matthew. He's my guy. He's a private investigator. I had him run a full background on Chloe's soon-to-be ex, Mark. The paper was a rap sheet. Mark wasn't just a vapid lifestyle blogger. He had 2 prior arrests for fraud, a string of defaulted high-interest loans, and a judgment against him from an investor in a wellness company that never existed. Mark is a con artist, Meredith stated flatly, and their divorce is a sham. Matthew staked out their old apartment last night after I called him. Mark isn't just visiting Chloe at your condo. He moved in with her. His car is in the guest parking. This isn't a divorce, it's a liquidation. They plan to steal your condo, sell it fast for cash, and disappear. Probably to some non-extradition country where Mark could start his next SC. AM. My blood ran cold. This was so much darker than Chloe just being a spoiled brat. This was a calculated, predatory plot. What do I do? I asked, my voice small. That's where we shift from victim to strategist, Meredith said. We have 2 options. 1, we go in loud. I call the police, have them arrested on your doorstep today. We file the civil suit. It's messy, it's public, and it's fast. And option 2. Option 2, Meredith said, her smile returning, is my preference. We let them think they're winning. We let them get comfortable. Matthew will spend the next few days gathering more photographic evidence that Mark is living there, that the divorce is a lie. We'll get a sworn affidavit from the notary whose signature is on that deed. I'd bet my partnership she never actually witnessed your mother sign it. We will build a case so airtight, so overwhelmingly damning, that they won't have a trial. They will have a reckoning. The anger from the night before crystallized into a hard, sharp point. They laughed at me, I said, my voice low. They laughed about me being homeless. Good, Meredith replied. That's what I was hoping you'd say. She picked up her phone. Matthew, you're on, full surveillance package. I want to know when they breathe. She hung up and looked at me. Now, we need to talk about the clever trap, as you put it, the thing they forgot. I leaned forward. They did forget something crucial. I never told them about it because, frankly, it was none of their business. They think I bought that condo as Jane Harris. And you didn't, Meredith said, a look of pure, predatory delight dawning on her face. No, I said, a slow, genuine grin spreading across my face for the first time in 24 hours. As an engineer on high-risk foreign contracts, you advised me years ago to protect my assets. I didn't buy it as Jane Harris. I bought it through my holding company. Meredith's eyes lit up. Vance Properties, LLC. Vance Properties, LLC, I confirmed. Of which I am the sole managing member. My mother forged my name on a deed for a property I don't even technically own. The LLC does. She's not just a forger, she's an incompetent forger. Meredith clapped her hands together, a single, sharp sound that echoed in the room. Oh, this is better than Christmas. They've forged the wrong name, on the wrong legal entity, using a voided power of attorney, all in service of a criminal conspiracy. Jane, they're not just going to lose. We are going to annihilate them. The next 3 days were a masterclass in patience. I stayed at Grace S., living out of my duffel bag, while Meredith and Matthew built the case. Matthew was a ghost. He produced time-stamped photos of Chloe and Mark kissing on my balcony, of Mark using my garage key fob, of them bringing in groceries together. He even had a recording from a bug he'd placed by their door, capturing a snippet of conversation. "Is she really not calling?" Chloe's voice, sounding nervous. "I told you she'll be fine," Mark's voice, smooth and reassuring. "She's probably just crying in some hotel. She'll give up. What's she going to do, sue her own mother?" You're right. Meredith, meanwhile, had tracked down the notary. As predicted, the notary was a panicked young woman who worked at a mail and parcel shop. She admitted, in a sworn affidavit, that Margaret had come in alone, claimed her daughter was overseas and had forgotten to sign, and that she just needed it notarized for her. The notary, fearing for her job and her license, was now our star witness. My mother's calls had escalated from panic to furious. I had over 30 missed calls and a string of texts that went from "Jane, I'm worried sick, call me," to "I cannot believe the disrespect, you ungrateful child." "It's time," Meredith said on Friday morning, her voice crisp over the phone. "They're comfortable. They're arrogant. Matthew says they have a new, very expensive-looking sofa being delivered this afternoon. I think it's time to disrupt their interior design plans." She had a plan, of course. It wasn't a quiet gotcha. It was a performance. At 2:00 p.m., I stood outside my own condo door. I wasn't alone. Beside me was Meredith, holding a thick leather briefcase. On my other side was a uniformed sheriff's deputy, who Meredith had arranged to keep the peace while we served civil papers. I knocked. This time I didn't wait. I knocked again, louder. "Chloe, Mom, open the door." I heard scuffling and annoyed muttering. The door flew open, and it was Chloe, her hair in a messy bun. Her face, which had been set in an expression of pure annoyance, froze when she saw me. Then it paled when she saw Meredith's suit and the deputy's uniform. What is this?" she stammered. "Hello, Chloe," I said, my voice bright and cold. "We're here to talk. Can we come in?" I didn't wait for an answer. I pushed past her in. Dee walked into the living room. My mother, Margaret, was sitting on the sofa, a new, hideous, crushed velvet thing, with Mark. Mark, the ex-husband, who was in his pajamas at 2 in the afternoon, holding a video game controller. They both shot to their feet. "Jane," my mother shrieked, clutching her chest. "You scared me. What is the meaning of this? Who are these people? You can't just barge in here." "Actually," Meredith said, stepping forward and placing her briefcase on the also new and also ugly coffee table. "She can. This is her property." "It is not," Chloe screeched, finding her voice. "I told you, Jane, it's mine. Mom gave it to me. It's legal. Tell them, Mom." "It's true," Margaret said, puffing up with self-righteousness. "I signed it over. I had the power of attorney. It's all legal. Now, get this. This officer, out of my daughter's home." Mark just stood there, silent, his eyes darting between Meredith and the deputy. He looked like a cornered rat. "Meredith, would you like to handle this?" I asked, crossing my arms. "With pleasure," Meredith said. She opened her briefcase and pulled out the first document. "Margaret Harris, you are being served with a civil complaint." She handed a thick stack of papers to my mother, who just stared at them. "Chloe Harris and Mark Boyd, you are also named defendants." She handed them each a copy. I don't understand," Mom whimpered. "Let me clarify," Meredith said, her voice cutting through the room. "You are being sued for damages related to conspiracy, fraud, and forgery. We are also filing for a temporary restraining order and an emergency eviction. But that's just the civil suit. We're here to talk about the criminal charges." Chloe laughed, a high, thin sound. "Criminal? You're crazy. My mom signed a paper. It's a family matter. You can't." "This," Meredith said, pulling out a second document, "is a copy of the deed you filed. The one Margaret Harris, as agent for Jane Harris, signed." "See, it's legal," Mom said. "And this," Meredith continued, ignoring her and pulling out a third document, "is the actual title deed for this property, pulled from the city registrar this morning. It lists the owner as Vance Properties, LLC. She let that hang in the air. Chloe and Mom just stared, their faces blank with confusion. They didn't understand. "What's that?" Chloe asked, narrowing her eyes. "What's Vance?" "That," I said, finally speaking up, "is my holding company. The company that has owned this condo for the last 10 years. You see, Mom, you signed my name, Jane Harris, to a deed for a property that Jane Harris does not own. The LLC does. All that paperwork you filed, it's completely, utterly worthless. It's a fraudulent document based on a forged signature for the wrong legal entity. You haven't just clouded the title. You've created a public record of your own crime." My mother's face went from white to a sickly shade of gray. Chloe looked at Mark. "What does she mean?" Mark, the con artist, understood. He understood immediately. His face went slack with panic. She means the title never transferred. It was never in your name, Chloe. It was never in her name." "Exactly," Meredith said, smiling. "Which means you, Chloe, and you, Mark, are not owners. You are trespassers. And you, Margaret, are a forger, a rather clumsy one at that." Chloe's face contorted in rage. You bitch," she shrieked at me. "You set us up. This was a trap." "It's not a trap, Chloe, when you are the one who brought the poison," I said calmly. "You and Mom did this. You planned it for months. You waited until I was overseas. You lied about your divorce. Oh, yes, Mark, we know all about that. We know you're not exes. You're partners. You were going to sell my condo, take the cash, and run, weren't you?" Mark lunged, not at me, but for the door. The deputy, who had been watching the entire exchange with quiet interest, simply stepped in his path. "I wouldn't, sir." Chloe turned on my mother. You said this would work. You said it was legal. You stupid old woman, you ruined everything." Mom burst into tears, collapsing onto the velvet sofa. "I was just trying to help you, baby. Jane has so much. She wouldn't even miss it." "I wouldn't miss my home," I yelled, my control finally cracking. "I wouldn't miss my home. You laughed at me. You told me I was homeless." "And that," Meredith said, her voice dropping, "is where we discuss the next item." She pulled out the final document. "This is a sworn affidavit from the notary public whose stamp is on your fraudulent deed. She is prepared to testify, in exchange for immunity, that you, Margaret, came in alone and coerced her into notarizing a document she never witnessed. That, Margaret, is a felony. That is jail time." The room went completely silent, broken only by my mother's ragged, terrified sobs. Chloe was frozen, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "Now," Meredith said, snapping her briefcase shut. "Here is what is going to happen. The deputy is going to escort you 3 out of this apartment. You will take your purses and your phones, nothing else. You will not return. If you attempt to return, you will be arrested for trespassing. We will have the locks changed within the hour. You have 60 seconds. Get your things." The silence that followed Meredith's ultimatum was heavier than anything I had ever experienced. It was the sound of a carefully constructed reality imploding. My mother was incapable of moving, her sobs having devolved into a silent, full-body tremor. Chloe, however, was vibrating with a rage that was almost tangible. "No," Chloe whispered, her eyes fixed on me. "No, you can't. This is my home. You owe me this." "I owe you," I repeated, the words tasting like acid. "I owe you, after you tried to steal my home, after you conspired with this con artist, to defraud me." "He is not a con artist," Chloe screamed, lunging at me. The deputy stepped between us instantly, his hand on her arm. "Ma'am, I advise you to calm down." "Don't you touch me," she shrieked, trying to wrench her arm free. "You're all in on it. This is my life you're ruining." Mark, seeing his exit blocked and his meal ticket in hysterics, finally spoke. "Baby, calm down," he said, trying to muster his smooth, reassuring tone. It came out shaky and desperate. "Let's just talk to the lawyer. I'm sure we can clear this up." Meredith actually laughed. "Clear this up? Mr. Boyd, the only thing you'll be clearing up is your schedule for your arraignment. We have your entire history, the defaulted loans. The wellness scam in Arizona. We know exactly who you are. And now, thanks to your little adventure here, the district attorney is going to know, too. This new information, the fact that we knew about his past, hit Mark like a physical blow. He staggered back, his bravado evaporating. He looked from me to Meredith and then to Chloe, his expression curdling from panic to contempt. He spat at Chloe. You said she was just a dumb workaholic. You said she'd roll over. You're as stupid as your mother. What? Chloe's shriek turned into a wail of disbelief. Mark, what are you? It's over, Chloe, he snapped. They've got us, this whole thing is blown. He turned to the deputy. Officer, I'm just a guest here. I don't know anything about any paperwork. She, he pointed at Chloe, told me this was her condo. I'm a victim here, too. It was the most pathetic, predictable betrayal, and it was glorious. You liar, Chloe flew at him, her hands clawed, raking at his face. You told me to do this. It was your idea. Sell it fast, you said. We'll be in Belize before she even knows. The deputy, with a long-suffering sigh, pulled her off him. That's enough. You're all coming outside. My mother, I said, nodding toward Margaret, who looked catatonic. She's an adult who committed a felony, Meredith said, her voice devoid of sympathy. She can walk. The deputy nodded. Ma'am, he said to my mother, you need to stand up. Slowly, as if in a trance, my mother stood. Her face was a ruin of tear-streaked makeup and terror. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at the fraudulent deed still clutched in her hand. Jane, she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Jane, please, I'm your mother. You were my mother, I said, my voice shaking but firm, when you were supposed to be protecting me. You were my mother when you were supposed to be proud of me. But when you forged my name, when you laughed with your other child about me being homeless, you stopped being my mother. You became a criminal, and I'm just the victim. I looked at Chloe, who was now being held by the arm by the deputy. Her face was ugly with tears and rage. I looked at Mark, who was frantically trying to edge his way toward the door, dissociating from the entire scene. Get them out, I said, turning my back on them. I heard the shuffling of feet, the deputy's firm, this way, folks, and Chloe's renewed, hysterical sobs. I heard my mother's pathetic whimper, my purse. I need my purse. I walked to my living room window and looked out over the city. I didn't watch them go. I listened. I listened to the sound of the apartment door opening, the sound of them being escorted into the hallway, and the final, beautiful, heavy click of the door being closed, leaving me alone in the silence. The apartment was a disaster. The pink walls were an assault. The velvet sofa was an abomination, but it was my apartment. The silence was broken by my phone ringing. It was Meredith. I picked it up. They're on their way down, she said. A locksmith is on his way up, and I have one more present for you. More, I said, sinking down onto my awful new sofa. Oh, yes, I had Matthew do a little more digging while we're waiting. Remember how Chloe said she needed the condo for her divorce? And we found out it was a lie. They were just going to sell it. Yes, Meredith said, satisfaction purring in her voice. But I wondered why they needed the cash so fast. It turns out Mark's wellness scam victims in Arizona weren't just suing. They filed a criminal complaint. There's a warrant out for his arrest in Maricopa County. I sat bolt upright. A warrant, you mean? I mean, I may have anonymously tipped off the local police precinct as to Mr. Boyd's current whereabouts. I imagine they'll be waiting for him in the lobby. I suspect this will make him very cooperative in testifying against Chloe and Margaret to save his own skin. I was speechless. And Chloe, Meredith continued, her credit card, the one she's been lifestyle blogging with, it's a joint card, with Mark, the one he's been funding with his investments. With his arrest, that account will be frozen by the end of the day. All of her assets, all of her money, gone. This was the second confrontation, the one they never saw coming. It wasn't just an eviction, it was a total, systemic dismantling of their lives. The spell wasn't just broken, it was shattered. They hadn't just lost my condo, they had lost everything. Meredith, I said, you are terrifying. I am, she replied cheerfully. The locksmith is at your door. I'll see you Monday to file the final reports. Try and have a good weekend, Jane. You've earned it. The days that followed were a blur of logistics and legal adrenaline. The locksmith changed the locks, installing a high-security system that was probably overkill, but it made me feel safe. Grace organized a painting party, and we spent the entire weekend covering the hideous pink walls with a warm, serene ivory. We hauled the velvet sofa and cheap, gold-legged tables to the curb. It was a cleansing, a reclamation of my space. Meredith's predictions, as always, were flawless. Mark Boyd was arrested in the lobby. Faced with an Arizona warrant and our mountain of evidence, he sang like a canary. He gave a full, detailed confession, painting Chloe as the greedy, manipulative mastermind and Margaret as the willing, spiteful accomplice. He admitted the entire plot was to sell the condo, split the cash, and flee the country. The district attorney, armed with Mark's testimony, the notary's affidavit, and the sheer, breathtaking stupidity of the fraudulent deed, moved fast. Margaret and Chloe were formally charged. The climax wasn't a public showdown at a family dinner. It was something far more sterile and, in its own way, far more brutal. A pretrial mediation hearing in a soulless conference room at the county courthouse. It was the first time I'd seen them since the deputy escorted them from my home. I was flanked by Meredith. They were across the table, each with their own beleaguered court-appointed public defender. They looked diminished. Chloe, stripped of her trendy clothes and makeup, looked sallow and thin, her eyes red-rimmed and darting. My mother, Margaret, looked like a woman who had aged 20 years in 2 weeks. She was crumpled, gray, and terrified. Ms. Harris, the mediator began, a tired-looking man in a rumpled suit. My understanding is the district attorney's office has offered your family a plea agreement, conditional on your full cooperation and satisfaction. That's correct, Meredith said, sliding a document across the table. It's very simple. In exchange for pleading guilty to the felony charges, conspiracy to commit fraud for Chloe, forgery for Margaret, the DA is offering 5 years probation, 1,000 hours of community service, and full, court-ordered restitution. Chloe's lawyer, a young man who looked exhausted, sighed. Restitution for what exactly? The condo was never successfully transferred. There were no actual financial damages. Meredith smiled. It was not a nice smile. Restitution, she said, for Ms. Harris's legal fees, which are substantial. Restitution for the cost of the locksmith, the painters, and the replacement of the furniture you disposed of. Restitution for the 2 weeks of wages she lost having to deal with this instead of returning to her duties. And, she added, restitution for the security deposit on the low-income apartment your clients are now presumably sharing. We're also requiring the immediate, permanent signing of a restraining order. They are to never come within 500 feet of my client, her home, or her place of work again. Chloe finally looked at me, her eyes brimming with a venomous, self-pitying hatred. You're doing this, she hissed, her voice hoarse. You're sending your own mother to jail. It's probation, Chloe, I said, my voice as calm and steady as the bedrock I studied. You're not going to jail, though you deserve it. You're getting a felony record, a record that will follow you, a record that will make it very diffy. Cult to get a lease or a loan or a job. You're getting the consequences, something you've avoided your entire life. But what are we supposed to do? Margaret suddenly wailed, her first words of the day. We have no money, Mark is gone, Chloe's accounts are frozen, we're homeless, I supplied, my voice quiet. Is that the word you're looking for? My mother flinched as if I had struck her. The mediator cleared his throat, looking down at his papers. You laughed, Mom, I said, leaning forward. You sat on my sofa in my home and you laughed at the idea of me being homeless. You did this. You stood by for 30 years and watched her take and take and take from me, and you encouraged it. You signed your name to a lie. This isn't a family matter. This is a crime. I stood up. Meredith, I'm done here. Wait, Chloe's lawyer said, panicked. If she doesn't sign off on the deal. The DA's alternative, Meredith said brightly, is to proceed to a full criminal trial. Given Mr. Boyd's confession, we are very, very confident of the outcome. And at that point, probation is off the table. We will be asking for the maximum sentence. 18 months in state prison, for both of them. Chloe's head snapped up. No. Margaret just dissolved, her head hitting the table with a dull thud, her body shaking with silent, terrified sobs. Chloe stared at her mother, then at me. The hatred in her eyes was warring with a desperate, animalistic panic. She knew she was beaten. She knew her enabler was broken. She was, for the first time in her life, completely and totally alone. "Sign the deal, Chloe," I said. "Sign it, and I never ever have to see you again." Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold the pen, but she picked it up. She looked at her mother, who was incapable of doing anything. Chloe grabbed the paper, her movements jerky, and scribbled her name. Then she shoved the pen at her mother. "Sign it, Mom," she hissed, her voice a venomous whisper. "Sign it, you useless old. Just sign it." My mother, her hand guided by her weeping daughter, shakily signed her name. It was done. There was no triumphant speech. There was just the quiet scratch of a pen, sealing their fate. I turned, without a backward glance, and walked out of the room, leaving the ruins of my family behind me. The resolution of a legal battle is never as clean as it is in the movies. There is no final, swelling music. There is only paperwork, but in its own quiet way, it was a total victory. Margaret and Chloe pled guilty. They were both convicted of felonies. Their 5-year probation came with severe restrictions, including mandatory employment and wage garnishment to begin the long, slow process of paying the 6-figure restitution I was owed, mostly for Meredith's formidable fees. The restraining order was granted, a crisp white piece of paper that legally barred them from my life. Mark Boyd was extradited to Arizona, where he faced a mountain of charges. He pled guilty and received a multi-year prison sentence. I heard from Meredith that he had, in fact, testified that the entire condo scheme was Chloe's idea from start to finish. The news of their downfall rippled through my extended family, who had long been silent observers of my mother's favoritism. The silence broke. I received calls from aunts and cousins, apologizing for not stepping in sooner, for always letting Margaret get away with it. They were awkward, fumbling calls, but they were a start. The family, it seemed, had finally been jolted out of its dysfunctional orbit. 6 months after I had walked out of that mediation, I was back on a plane, this time to a project site in Norway. But the departure was different. My condo was secure, watched over by Grace, who had a legal, enthusiastic set of keys. My assets were bundled even more tightly by Meredith, who had restructured my LLCs into a fortress. I was leaving not as an escape, but as a choice. I found a strange, quiet peace in the wake of the storm. The anger had faded, leaving a scar, but also a sense of profound, weary relief. I had grieved the loss of my family long before they'd tried to steal my home. The court case was just the funeral. One evening, while I was video chatting with Grace from my new, much more comfortable-looking work trailer, she held up a letter. "This came for you. It's from your mother." I paused. What does it say? Grace opened it. It's a check for $47.11. Looks like the first wage garnishment payment. She turned the check over, and there's a note on the back. "Read it," I said. Grace squinted. "I hope you're happy." I stared at the pixelated image of my mother's cramped, angry handwriting. I thought about the pink walls, the velvet sofa, the sound of their laughter. I thought about the look of sheer, pathetic terror on their faces in that conference room. "You know," I said, leaning back in. "My chair, I really am. I had my home, I had my career. I had a friend who would help me bury the bodies or, in this case, hire the lawyer to do it legally. My family had tried to take the one thing I had built for myself, and in doing so, they had only succeeded in proving how strong my foundations truly were. I had faced the betrayal, I had set the trap, and I had, finally, won.